is a lift bridge. And what is there are two towers, and there's a big midsection that lifts straight up, and there are counterweights inside the towers. And there are many bridges like this. You see many bridges like this in New Jersey. They're in a lot of industrial areas and channels, and where they need to have low-level bridges, and they're usually not terribly wide spans, but they have to have a lot of ship traffic going through, so they build these lift bridges. This is in Sacramento, California, and I've had the great good fortune 3 or 4 times to ride the giant concrete counterweights on these things.
Wow! Wow!
When you see, actually, I've ridden this bridge, the Tower Bridge, in Sacramento. Steel Bridge in Portland, which is an amazing bridge, has 2 separate decks, a rail deck and a road deck that lifts separately. It's an engineering marvel. And I've ridden another bridge up in the Portland area, another railway bridge. And I've ridden a couple of bascule bridges that actually like tip up, where the entire bridge just tips up like a yard arm. But I don't have any photos of those, unfortunately. This is the Richmond San Rafael Bridge in San Pablo Bay, north of San Francisco, which is a cantilever span. Really beautiful bridge, and it's sort of the least known bridge in the Bay Area. It's more exciting, sexier sisters, the Golden Gate Bridge and the Bay Bridge. But I like this bridge. This is there's a really long walk out. You have to walk like 1.5 miles underneath the road deck to get out to the cantilever tower. And I was walking out at low tide by myself one time, and it's all water, and it was low tide, and as I'm walking along this beam about maybe 70 or 80 feet above the water, all of a sudden it was pretty quiet, there were a few cars going over, all of a sudden there was this huge cacophony of sound, like 100 people were screaming at me at the top of their lungs. I looked down, and there was a reef that was uncovered at low tide, and on that reef was an entire moving body of maybe 500 sea lions, and I woke them up. And they were pissed. Nobody bothered them. So, but anyway, I was walking out to get this. Now, this is the counterpart to the Golden Gate Bridge in one respect, and that is this is the bridge where people in southern England go to kill themselves. And but there's a little difference with this bridge. If you jump off of this bridge, what happens is you hit the water. You go through 2 or 3 feet of water, and then you hit 30 to 40 to 50 feet of viscous, fine mud. They have not recovered most of the jumpers, so there are probably, who knows how many, maybe as many as 1,000 body pods underneath this bridge.
What's the name of this bridge again?
I knew you'd like that one, Chris. This is the Clifton Suspension Bridge. Now, I climbed this bridge at night with my girlfriend Jill Mead, who was a Yorkshire lass that I dated for a couple of years, and we climbed the bridge, and it's a beautiful, and you can see it's an astonishing structure, it's lighted. While we were up there, you see that little light in the middle of the bridge? That's a car that stopped in the middle of the bridge. A guy, and it's not quite as far a distance as it seems. The span is about 900 feet from tower to tower, so it's like less than a quarter the span of the Golden Gate Bridge. But a guy walked out onto the roadway and was trying to jump over the railing, and I was maybe 3 to 5 minutes away from him, so I climbed down and ran. And I was getting ready. I said, Joe, I'm going to go get this guy. I was getting ready to go down. Oh, when his boyfriend came out and started screaming at him, and they started wrestling over the railing. We're watching this happen, wrestling over the railing, and we're just sitting there. And then the Bobby, who sits in the little, they have a toll gate at one end of the bridge. He saw this ruckus going on, and so he ran out, and the two of them dragged this guy back over the railing while we were sitting there watching. So, great, amazing bridge, and there you can kind of. So, yeah, I love England. I almost ended up moving there and living in a pub, which is where I would be, and I'd weigh 400 pounds. But it wouldn't be that bad. Now, what's wrong with this bridge?
It doesn't go anywhere.
Well, this is an interesting type of bridge. It's actually technically not a bridge. It's called a transporter bridge, and many of them were built in Europe from the 1890s through the 30s. And there was the largest of these bridges was at Marseille Harbor in southern France, and it was blown up by the Nazis in World War II in order to block the shipping lanes in the harbor. This is the Middlesbrough transporter bridge in northern England, Yorkshire. The way this thing works is it's actually a suspended truss, and this one is a cantilever truss. It's basically those four legs hold up this big truss, cantilever truss, and then the deck, the bottom part of the deck has a trolley on it, and along that trolley runs what's called a truck, which is a rolling device. And from that truck, these cables drop down to a suspended carriage, and that suspended carriage, 6 buses and 10 cars and 100 people can go onto, and it just wafts it back and forth across the river mouth. Now this is one of the 2 of these type of bridges left in England. There were 15 of them originally in England, I think 14 or 15, and this is one of the 2 that are left. And I was there with my girlfriend Jill. We were climbing bridges all over. We bought a cheap car and we're driving all over the place climbing bridges in Britain, Scotland, and Wales. And I wanted to climb this, and we just went over to the bridge engineer's office, which is that little red house there on the left, where we met Harry Todd, who was the bridge engineer. And we were the first people in 3 years to knock on his door and ask him about the bridge.
Huh.
He gave me a key to the tower.
Hey.
And we spent the whole day on the bridge. And he was a sweet man. He loved his bridge and his job. Didn't understand why nobody else cared about it at all. And we corresponded for a while. This is another transporter bridge in Newport, South Wales. Now this is not a cantilever span. It is a suspension span. You can see the road deck is suspended from suspension cables, and if you look off to the extreme right or left, you'll notice that the cables aren't connected to anything. They just go to the ground where they're anchored in the ground. And it's the same type of bridge, and it has a carriage that goes back and forth over the river estuary, or the estuary. And this is sitting on top of that bridge, which we climbed during the day, and no one noticed that we were there during the day. This is the Straits Bridge in Wales. It goes over from like northwestern Wales to Holyhead Island, and it was built by Thomas Telford in the 1830s. It's one of the oldest suspension bridges using modern metallurgic techniques. They're not modern anymore, but they were then. And it's an interesting bridge. It's a suspension bridge, as you can tell. Sitting on stone arch towers, and it does not use suspension cables. Now, almost all the bridges that you've seen, except for a few in Pittsburgh, have suspension cables. They're literally cables, wire rope is what it's called. Now, these back when they first started making suspension bridges, there was another technique they used, which is called the I-bar link suspenders, and this is what this bridge is. There's the largest one, I think it was the largest one, was called the Florianpolis Bridge, and it was in Brazil. But this is the Straits Bridge, one of the oldest of this type of bridge. And this is a shot taken down the river. And I stood on top of Robert Stevenson's tubular bridge, which is a rail bridge just south of this bridge, to take this shot. Unfortunately, I don't have a photograph of that one in this bunch, but that's the bridge at night. And so you can kind of get an idea. There's a detail of the cables, or not the cables, of the I-bar suspenders. They are very much like a bicycle chain, which I thought was quite amazing. And they move just like a bicycle chain when there's a load on the deck. Well, that's something I should mention. Bridges move a lot depending on the stresses that they're having at the time. For instance, on top of the Golden Gate Bridge at night, when there's very little traffic, if a fully loaded semi goes over, an 18-wheeler with 70,000 pounds, the bridge tower moves. You can feel that one vehicle going over the bridge. I was on top of the Golden Gate Bridge towers one time in a wind. I've been up there several times in windstorms, but one time in an extreme windstorm, where the tower had to be moving a good 6 to 8 feet side to side. I mean, it was pretty. I mean, I might be exaggerating, but I was trying to get a visual line on the shore and just try to get an idea how much it was moving. It was pretty bizarre. This is the Firth of Forth Railway Bridge over the Firth of Forth in Scotland. This is the most massive thing ever built by humankind as far as being overbuilt. And it's a beautiful bridge to me, a very beautiful bridge. It was designed in response to the Tay Bridge collapse, which had happened several years earlier. The Tay Bridge was designed by Sir Thomas Bouch, who was the premier engineer of England at the time, and it went over the Firth of Tay, which was I think it was just north of the Firth of Forth, and just north of the Firth of Forth. And It went down 6 or 8 months later in a windstorm with a train going over it, and all 57 people on the train were lost. And the response to this, because England was expanding rapidly with the Industrial Revolution at the time, and they needed to have a network of trains going everywhere in order to move, not produce, but to move metal and sheep and whatever that, whiskey and whatever else they needed to move. And so this bridge, Sir Thomas Bouch, who was a very celebrated man, died of pneumonia 4 months after this bridge collapsed. Of course, everyone knows that he killed himself, but in England at that time, people of that caliber didn't commit suicide.